What happens when a soft-spoken woman walks into a luxury cafe and becomes the punchline? They mocked her without knowing who she really was or who was about to walk through that door. What followed left the entire room speechless. You ever just want to do one kind thing and go home? That was me that morning. Saturday. Sky soft like butter. Breeze carrying the smell of someone else's barbecue. I had a warm paper bag of cinnamon rolls in my hand. Not for me, for Miss Grace, my neighbor across the hall. 84, diabetic, and sweet enough to make you feel bad about every bad thing you've ever said about anyone. Now, I could have just gone straight to her place, but I thought, you know what, Renee? Treat yourself to a decent cup of coffee, not that instant dust you drink Monday through Friday. So I stopped at this new cafe downtown. Place had a name like it thought it was in Paris. Veranda and Roast. Sounds fancy, right? And Lord, they made sure you felt it. White marble counters, chairs that looked like they cost more than my rent, and folks dressed like they were headed to a TED Talk about disrupting granola. Still, I walked in like I belonged. Because I do. I pay taxes, I volunteer at the school clinic, and I still make the best peach cobbler this side of the Mississippi. That counts for something, doesn't it? Apparently not. The minute I stepped through that door, I felt the temperature drop. Not outside, in there. You know that kind of quiet that isn't really quiet, where you feel folks looking at you without turning their heads. That's what hit me first. Second thing, the barista. Boy couldn't have been older than 25, wearing an apron like it was military issued and a smirk that said, "You sure you're in the right place, ma'am?" I stepped up. "Good morning," I said, warm as I could. "Can I get a cappuccino and maybe a croissant if it's fresh?" He didn't answer, just kind of blinked at me, like my voice had to travel a few more feet to reach his ears. Then he goes, we usually don't do to-go orders during reserved hours." I looked around. 3 tables taken, 5 wide open. Ain't a soul in there holding a clipboard or a reservation list. But before I could respond, I heard it. Laughter. Not the kind you join in on, the kind meant to let you know you're the joke. I turned slightly and saw them. A young white couple sitting near the window, dressed like trust funds and tennis club memberships. The woman whispered something, and they both burst out giggling. Then the man, not even trying to lower his voice, said, "Maybe she thinks this is that chicken joint on 8th. Then or she followed the smell of cinnamon like a cartoon character. And they laughed. Full on. Now, I've been through enough in my life to let most things slide off me like rain on a slick coat. But something about that moment, the way their faces folded in amusement, the way the barista looked relieved that someone else said what he was thinking, it hit me somewhere raw. I held my bag tighter, didn't say a word, just turned and walked out, slow and steady. Because if there's one thing you learn growing up black in this country, it's how to leave with dignity when folks try to take it from you. Outside, the sun was still shining, but something in me had shifted. You know that feeling when something breaks and you don't know what yet, but you felt it snap? Yeah, that. And just when I thought that would be the end of my morning, well, that's when things started to get interesting. What happened next changed everything. You don't want to miss what went down when I stepped back into that world and brought something with me. Now listen, most folks would have let it go. Go home, sip some corner store coffee, and convince yourself it wasn't that deep. But not me, not today. Because the very next morning, my phone rang at 8:07 a.m. sharp. And that call, it yanked the lid clean off the whole mess. It was the assistant principal at Franklin Elementary, where I worked part-time as a school nurse. Her voice had that tone, the kind people use right before asking you to volunteer for a disaster. "Renee, I hate to bother you on a Sunday, but something happened yesterday. One of your kids, Jamal, got kicked out of a cafe downtown. Apparently, he had some kind of meltdown in front of the place and hasn't spoken since. Jamal, sixth grade, smart as a whip, quiet, sensitive. The kind of boy who makes origami dragons during recess and thanks you every time you hand him a tissue. He also happens to be on the spectrum. And guess what his favorite thing in the world is? Cinnamon rolls. And where do they sell them? You guessed it, veranda and roast. I hung up that call and stared at the same paper bag I'd set on the kitchen counter yesterday, the one I never gave to Miss Grace. Still warm, still full, still smelling like kindness. But now it smelled like something else, unfinished business. So I put on my best Sunday coat, navy blue, long, and lined with "Don't mess with me" energy, and went back. This time I didn't walk in as someone looking for a croissant. I walked in as Ms. Harper, staff representative of a public school, citizen with rights, and woman tired of the same old song in a different key. The place was just as pretty, just as smug, but now the barista wore a new face. Same kid, new attitude. He stiffened up when he saw me. Before I could even get out a word, the manager appeared. Blonde bob, tight blazer, lips pursed like she tasted something bitter and couldn't find a napkin. Her name tag said Clarissa with a K, which already told me enough. She didn't even offer a hello. "Can I help you?" she said, like I'd interrupted her private book club. "Yes," I replied calmly. "I'm here to discuss an incident involving a student of mine who was reportedly turned away from your establishment. He has special needs. He was traumatized. And I want to understand exactly what happened." Her face didn't move an inch. She blinked once, then gave me a rehearsed smile you'd expect from someone explaining a broken vending machine. "We have rules," she said. "We don't allow unaccompanied minors during brunch hours." "Mm-hmm," I nodded. "And you enforce that rule evenly?" "Of course," she said too quickly. "So the three white boys who sat in that corner booth yesterday morning, also unaccompanied, were what? Staff members?" She hesitated, blinked again. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice." "Oh, you're going to ask me to lower my voice? That's interesting, because y'all didn't lower yours when that couple laughed at me in front of the entire cafe less than 24 hours ago." Her eyebrows twitched. She recognized me now. I saw it, that flicker behind her eyes. And that's when the shift happened. "I think it's time you leave," she said sharply. "And I think it's time I make a phone call," I said, reaching into my coat pocket. She flinched. "And I promise you." In that one moment, she looked less like a manager and more like someone who just realized they backed the wrong horse in the wrong race. But no, I didn't dial the police. I called my husband. Now, I didn't say a word to her about who he was, didn't give a title, a rank, or even a last name. But something in the way I said, "You might want to stay close," made her stop moving. I walked outside slow and easy, heart still racing but hands steady, sat on the little bench across the street, bag of cinnamon rolls beside me, and I waited. What happened next? Well, let's just say Clarissa with a K was about to learn that not everyone you laugh at walks away quietly. This is the climax. Everything you've waited for is right around the corner. Stick around to see how I flip the script and who stood up when the truth walked through that door. You ever watched a whole room change temperature without the thermostat moving an inch? That's what happened the moment he walked in. I was still across the street, sipping the lukewarm remains of a gas station coffee. Classy, I know, when I saw his SUV pull up. Not flashy, not loud. Just a sleek black government-issued vehicle that whispered power like a sermon. And out stepped my husband, Colonel Henry Elijah Harper, retired Air Force, Bronze Star recipient, crisis advisor to 3 administrations. Man who once stared down a foreign diplomat so hard, the man apologized in 3 languages. And in that moment, just a husband, a quiet storm wearing polished boots and a pressed uniform, walking with that calm, calculated stride that says, "This will be handled." Now, I didn't tell him what to say. I didn't need to. He saw the look on my face when I made that call. He knew. He walked into veranda and roast like it was a briefing room at the Pentagon. Chin up, eyes sharp. Not a drop of anger, but every ounce of authority. Inside, folks froze. I mean it. Even the espresso machine went silent. And Clarissa, Miss We Have Rules, she came rushing from behind the counter like a waitress who just realized she spilled hot tea on the mare. "Sir, can I help you?" That shaky smile was hanging on her lips like bad wallpaper. Henry didn't yell, didn't point fingers. He just looked her dead in the eye and said, "My wife was disrespected here yesterday. A child with special needs was humiliated here the day after. And your team laughed in both their faces." Her mouth opened. No sound came out. It was like watching Wi-Fi cut off mid-sentence. He continued calm and clean. "This isn't about coffee or croissants. It's about dignity, something this place seems to withhold based on the color of someone's skin." Now people were starting to pull out phones. I could see the glint of camera lenses from the sidewalk, and I knew the story was no longer just mine. It was unfolding in real time, and folks were recording every breath. Clarissa finally found her voice, and it wobbled like a toddler on ice. We, we didn't mean, it wasn't intended as." Henry raised a hand, just one. She stopped mid-word. "Intent doesn't erase impact," he said. "You don't get to laugh at my wife and then call it a misunderstanding. You don't get to make a child feel like an outsider and hide behind a policy." And just like that, silence again. He turned to the other patrons. Some stared at their laps like guilty kids in church. A few had the decency to look ashamed. One woman, the same one who laughed at me the day before, put on sunglasses like that would hide her face from justice. But justice has a long memory and better vision than she thought. Within an hour, that video hit the internet. By sunset, it was on 3 major platforms and had already been stitched into a news segment. By Monday, Veranda and Roast issued a statement, the kind that uses words like deep regret and values inclusivity, which we all know as corporate for, "We got caught." The district superintendent called me, not once but twice. First to apologize, second to ask if I'd consider speaking to staff about bias in public spaces. And Jamal? He came back to school on Tuesday with a sketch pad full of cinnamon roll-shaped spaceships, smiled when he saw me, first time in days. But here's the part no one saw coming. Clarissa was replaced by a new manager, a black woman named Miss Loretta, who made the best sweet cream latte I ever tasted and told me straight-faced, "Ain't nobody getting turned away under my watch, baby." Now that's what I call full circle. And me? I still bring Miss Grace her cinnamon rolls. Only now they come with a little story on the side. And if you ever find yourself on the wrong end of someone's smirk, remember this. The quietest person in the room might just be the storm you didn't see coming,